It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Today I want to jump on that gigantic, sharp, interactive board and discuss Epson buying Fiery. You know, years ago, there was a guy that ran a circus. His name was Barium Bailey, and he came up with a great quote. It goes like this: "There's a sucker born every minute." And the reason Barium Bailey came up with that quote is he knew you had to be a sucker to pay a nickel to see a baby with an alligator head. Because there's no such thing as a baby with an alligator head. It was all made up. I'd probably just upset some old folks in the print industry that used to go to the circus. You mean the baby with the alligator head wasn't real? No. Folks, I got to be honest with you. You know, I made some kids cry one time when I told them Santa Claus wasn't real either. But sometimes you just got to say it the way it is. But Epson, what are you doing? Folks, you know, Fiery used to be owned by EFI. And EFI was a publicly traded company. And if you look at the numbers when they were a publicly traded company, and I have the numbers for 2017 and 2018, they went off NASDAQ in 2019. But when you look at the revenue of Fiery from 2017 to 2018, it declined quite a bit. When you think about 2019, did it decline? Did it grow? When you think about 2020, we had a global pandemic. 2021, we're in a pandemic. I don't think a whole lot of command stations were going out there, right? I saw a number that was published where Epson paid $591 million for Fiery. I think Barium Bailey was right. Epson, I don't know what you were thinking you would find when you looked behind a curtain. But I think whatever you thought that was delusion. Because I do believe that the OEMs decided to think about digital front ends the day that EFI went off NASDAQ. They thought about it a little bit harder the day that EFI spun out Fiery on its own. And we all know that Fiery, well, let's be honest, it was built around laser print. We know that production industrial prints all go into inkjet. And I believe the OEMs are going to be in control of their own digital front end. So without any further ado, let's jump on the board. I'll share what I put together for you. First thing we got to do is go back in time. It was in July 2019 when the press releases came out that EFI is exiting NASDAQ. Folks, when Series took them off NASDAQ, guess what? It was a leveraged buyout, and EFI ended up with $1 billion in debt. Let's look at some numbers. In the year 2017, the Fiery division of EFI did $266 million. In the year 2018, it did $239 million. We don't know what it did in 2019. But at the end of the day, you can clearly see from 2017 to 2018, it declined. You know what grew? The industrial inkjet. You know, EFI has some nice products up there in that industrial inkjet space. Of course, we don't know what the revenue is on that now, but we do know they got some nice products, and that's where they wanted to put their focus. But folks, look at some numbers here. You want to talk about losses. At the end of 2017, EFI as a company lost $15.3 million. At the end of 2018, EFI as a company lost $971,000, almost $1 million. Better than losing $15 million, but we don't know what the losses were going to be in 2019. Maybe that's why they decided we got to get off the stock market. Because, folks, that's when they sold it. 2019, they sell the company, and then in 2023, January of 2023, I come and I do an episode, and I show the boot, giving the kick to Fiery, giving the kick to the productivity software, right? So EFI decides, you know what, we got to take this Fiery thing and get it out from underneath us so we can focus on the industrial inkjet stuff. Let's spin off Fiery as its own entity. Still owned by Series, but has nothing to do with EFI. So at that point, in 2023, EFI did not have Fiery, and EFI did not have the productivity software business. It just had the industrial inkjet business. But folks, when you read this, when they spun off Fiery, and you read, they talk about how the neutrality is fantastic. Because see, if EFI, the people that had the industrial inkjet, also were in control of the Fiery, and the digital front end, maybe the other OEMs would be upset about that, right? So they're selling it as a benefit when they exit EFI, the neutrality, we're on our own. And then they end up selling to Epson. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, there's no neutrality anymore. Epson owns Fiery. Do you honestly believe that the OEMs are comfortable with another OEM controlling their digital front end? You know, the differentiator is in the software applications, the go-to-market strategies, the thing that your product can do that other products can't do. And when a digital front end is being put together by a company that's neutral, well, you know what? They're going to work with the OEMs. And the OEMs will help and assist in that development. But you think they're going to do that now? I believe that when Fiery was spun out on its own was when the OEMs had the wake-up call and they said, man, we got to figure this digital front end out on our own. And if production and industrial prints go into the inkjet world, we don't need the old outdated Fiery stuff anyway. Barium Bailey was right. Ladies and gentlemen, I saw this. Fiery to be acquired by Epson. And this was sent out to folks, and they said they paid $591 million. So if you look at the revenue I showed you from 2017 to 2018, we're down to $239 million. I don't believe they did anything in 2020 and 21 during the pandemic. So did they pay like double revenue for Fiery? How much debt did EFI saddle Fiery with when they spun them off on their own? We don't know that, do we? Folks, at the end of the day, when EFI went off NASDAQ in 2019, which wasn't that far ago, they had $1 billion in debt. How much of that debt got spun off with the productivity software? How much of that debt got spun off with Fiery? How much debt did Epson end up having to pay? Epson paid way too much. Could you imagine what Epson could have done with $591 million? I'll tell you what they could have done that would have made a whole lot more sense. They could have went to some really big dealers and they could have said, you know what? We want to give you $100 million worth of Epson machines to go out and do a major account or a national account and just give them to the customer. And then, of course, they would have got all the ink business for the next 5 years. Plus, they would have got a really, really happy big old dealer that probably would be buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of products from Epson. Epson, I think Barium Bailey was right. Think about this. Why Epson? I mean, these are all the partners that Epson partners, or that Fiery partners with. Why is it that Epson bought them? Why not Canon? I mean, we all would assume that Canon is probably the largest customer to Fiery. I've heard that out there, and I kind of believe they probably are. Why didn't they buy Fiery? Do you think maybe Canon could have developed their own digital front end and they're really close to announcing that, and Fiery's like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose Canon, our largest customer? Epson, I'm really starting to believe Barium Bailey was right. Because if you think about why Epson, it kind of makes you think, why not these other folks? Who will be the first OEM to kick Fiery to the curb? Because I believe that they will. And you know which one I think is going to do it? Well, I think it's going to be Canon. Remember when Canon got so upset with HP back when Xerox was trying to buy HP? I brought this up numerous times. I think this was a stupid thing, by the way, that Canon did. But they did do it. And they told HP, if you do a deal with Xerox, we're done with you. Our relationship's over. Maybe Canon's thinking the same thing about Fiery doing a deal with Epson. You're going to do a deal with Epson? Our relationship's over. Epson, I'm really starting to think Barium Bailey was right. Ladies and gentlemen, OEMs can make each other's hardware. But the differentiator is in the software and the processes, in the delivering to the end users. There's rumors out there that EFI, Fiery, can't say EFI anymore, just Fiery, has a 60% market share. A company that has a 60% market share and they change something drastically, opens the door wide for the competitors. And those competitors could be the internal R&D departments of the OEMs that have partnered with Fiery. Because I'm thinking right now, they are scrambling to finish their digital front ends. Because I don't think any of them are starting that process. I think they started that process back in 2019. But folks, there's going to be some competition. I think about that Fiery Command workstation. I mean, it's 1990. Not really. I mean, it came out 10 years ago, 2014. But seriously, the Fiery Command Station, is that not getting to a point where it's pretty obsolete in today's marketplace? Folks, aren't we going to the cloud? Can't we have a rip in the cloud? Someone told me, well, there's no way they could process that quick in the cloud. Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching movies coming from the cloud, okay? Remember the old days when you tried to stream and it would get interrupted and it would stop and it would spool? Those days are long gone. If we can watch a 4-hour movie from the cloud, we can damn sure rip from the cloud. And I believe the future of digital front ends is not going to be a computer system on the floor by the machine. Just saying. It's in the differentiator, ladies and gentlemen. And the OEMs are going to create digital front ends on their own. Those digital front ends that they create on their own are going to be their differentiator. They are never going to allow a competitor OEM to do that for them. And those of you that think they will, well, I believe Barium Bailey was onto something those so many years ago. And everybody watching me knows this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.